In today's episode of the Daily Brief, I'll talk about two interesting stories. I first talk about Indigo Airlines, and finally, I talk about where India sits with electric vehicles. Welcome to the Daily Brief show by Zerodha, where our aim is to simplify the biggest news in the financial markets in a way that's one level deeper as compared to news channels. I'm your host, Akshara. Today is Monday, 26th May. Coming to the first story. At the moment, India's listed aviation space might as well be synonymous with a single behemoth, Indigo Airlines. The company controls nearly 65% of all Indian aviation, nearly 25 times that of its only listed rival, SpiceJet. This is why, to us, understanding how Indigo works is central to understanding India's aviation industry. Airlines are a famously tricky business to run. Aircraft fleets are staggeringly expensive to maintain. A lot of those costs stick around, whether or not a company has passengers to cater to. You can't really cut corners with aircraft maintenance. Risking a plane crash is simply not an option. Meanwhile, no airline is guaranteed passengers. No matter what an airline does, unless people have an extraneous reason to travel, they just won't buy a ticket. And so, to a great extent, an airline's sales are not only driven by its own policies, but by the broader economic climate around them. Their business is also constantly hit by all sorts of factors that lie outside its control, from oil prices to pandemics to the outbreak of war. Regulators do monitor the sector closely and intervene often because no government wants to risk a single aircraft failure. In essence, if you're running an airline, you have to put gigantic sums of money on the line, and whether you'll recover those costs is outside your control. That's why so many airlines across the world go bankrupt so often. In this business, there's really just one option you have: put your head down, run your operations as smoothly as possible, and hope for the best. That's the game that Indigo's playing. And to us, at least, it looks like it's playing the game rather well. So this is how Indigo's quarter went. The quarter gone by was an exceptional one for Indigo's business. The company's revenue for the quarter went up by nearly 25% of the same quarter last year. Its expenses, meanwhile, rose much slower, by 19.1% year on year. In other words, the company posted much better margins this quarter. Its EBITDA margin went up to 27.5% in Q4 compared to 22.4% last year. This was quite a leap, and that showed up in the company's earnings. Indigo's EBITDA went up by a giant 59% year on year, and with that, the company's net profit shot up by nearly two-thirds within the space of a year, from rupees 1,895 crore to rupees 3,068 crore. This capped off a great year. For the first time ever, the company's total revenue over the year broke past the $10 billion mark. So what's behind this performance? For one, the company is just growing its business. Indigo added more aircraft to its fleet, 434 against 367 last year, and it ran longer routes. Airlines usually count both together in something called available seat kilometers, or ASK, the number of seats multiplied by the number of kilometers they've flown. Indigo improved its ASK to 42.1 billion in Q4 FY25 compared to 34.8 billion last year. It also managed to fill most of these new seats. Indigo boasted a passenger load factor of 87.4% over the quarter, an improvement from last year's 86.2%. Roughly speaking, that means 87.4% of its seats were occupied over the quarter. In short, the company's margins, to a great extent, are just a result of it running a tight airship. But with that, it also caught some lucky breaks. For one, oil prices fell over most of the year, and Indigo pocketed most of the gains. It was paying rupees 1.6 per seat per kilometer in fuel compared to rupees 1.76 a year ago. Sounds like a minor shift, we know, but those savings can add up. 2. This quarter featured a once-in-a-decade gathering, the Mahakumbh, with its 66 crore attendees. It also saw the upside of a longer wedding season. Zooming out, there's also a longer-term trend that has helped the airline soar: fewer grounded aircraft. This is a problem that has haunted the airline for the better part of a decade. Back in 2016, Indigo inducted a series of A320neo planes which featured Pratt& Whitney engines. Those engines, however, weren't up to the mark and started seeing serious failures. Airlines all over the world, Indigo included, were forced to ground their fleets as they scrambled for answers. Finding new airplane engines, however, wasn't easy, and it became much more difficult as all operations stalled during the pandemic. To get by, Indigo had to lease aircraft, which sent up its costs. The problem peaked early in 2024 when it was forced to confine more than 70 planes to the ground. But slowly, things have been improving. Nearly half of its grounded aircraft are now back in action, and with it, the company is able to shed its leasing costs. Indigo is famously a low-cost carrier. That's how it first made its mark in an industry that featured full-service carriers like Jet Airways and Air India. Only it looks like the company is slowly moving to slightly premium offerings. Over the last year, it launched a loyalty program, Blue Chip. It also began something resembling a business class, Stretch, with complimentary meals, better baggage allowance, and nicer seats. It's also started running wide body flights over an ever increasing list of international routes, moving away from its staple fare of no frills, narrow body aircraft. In other words, after surviving a market that saw a steady parade of full service carriers crashing out, Indigo is slowly starting to look like those it replaced. Is Indigo pivoting to a new strategy? For now, the company insists that's not the case. The company stands for lean operations, not substandard products, and that continues as its management clarified. I think you should make a difference between low cost and low cost operations, or a low cost basis if you wish. And I think Indigo prides itself, and we remain committed to that, to be an operator with a very low cost basis. That has not meant domestically that we're having a product which is not high quality. It's interesting, nevertheless, that the company is experimenting with a new sort of game, and we're curious to see how it goes. If you're following the airline sector, though, you're probably as interested in what happened after the quarter as you are in Indigo's quarterly results themselves. After all, once Pahalgam was hit by terror attacks, the India-Pakistan tensions that followed threw up serious challenges for the airlines industry. Tourism took a sharp hit as tensions began to boil. Pakistan, meanwhile, shuttered its airspace. And then, once May rolled around, the two countries started exchanging blows. Within the space of a single month, a large chunk of the subcontinent turned into a big no-fly zone. So how does an airline company see this sort of a situation? Right from April 22nd, when the attack took place, Indigo saw a wave of cancellations. Soon afterwards, Pakistan's airspace closed up. The company had to suspend flights to two cities, Tashkent and Almaty, while for 34 routes, it had to go all the way around Pakistan. That added 20 to 30 minutes to flight times and drank up more fuel. As tensions increased in May, it had to suspend operations from 11 airports in northwestern India. 170 flights were cancelled. In the meanwhile, its staff had to placate customers that were distressed by the entire situation. In a sense, briefly, the conflict threw the company's operations in jeopardy. But that's where diversification comes in. Indigo flies thousands of flights a day in regions all across India and abroad. Some of that business was affected by the situation, but the lion's share of its operations went on as usual, and a month on, things have already started getting back to normal. There are some minor tremors still. Indigo's long-standing partnership with Turkish Airlines, for instance, has suddenly come under question after Turkey clearly took sides in the recent flare-up. The bottom line, though, is that things are quickly coming back to normal. For all the chaos baked into the airline business, from unpredictable demand to black swan geopolitical shocks, Indigo appears to have found some sort of rhythm. It's running tight operations, flying more passengers farther than ever before, and making more money while doing it. It isn't immune to trouble, of course. The recent flare-up in the subcontinent is proof enough of that. But it does suggest something deeper. Indigo's business seems robust enough to take a hit, adapt, and keep flying. Now coming to the second story. So where does India sit with electric vehicles? Yeah, we know we've been going on and on about the green transition, but bear with us because there are just too many rabbit holes to dive into. See, the International Energy Agency's Global EV Outlook 2025 just dropped. And there's a lot to unpack. Electric vehicles are turning mainstream across the globe, though at dramatically different rates depending on where you look. We are at the very beginning of an exploding market and a country-wide infrastructure build-out. But that'll only materialize if we fix a range of issues. And if we don't, there's a very real risk of falling behind in a new technological revolution. There's a lot happening, so let's dive right into it. Electric car sales shattered records in 2024, exceeding 17 million vehicles globally. Think about this. In 2024, 3.5 million more EVs were sold across the world than in 2023. That difference alone is more than the total number of electric cars sold worldwide in 2020. That's what exponential growth looks like in action. China continues to tear through the space. Out of nowhere, its electric cars have come to account for almost half of all the cars sold there in 2024. Get this, the over 11 million electric cars sold in China alone last year are more than global sales just 2 years earlier. They're well on their way to electrifying their entire fleet. 1 in 10 cars on Chinese roads is already electric. Europe's growth, on the other hand, has stalled. Its subsidy programs are waning, though the market share of electric cars is holding steady at around 20%. Meanwhile, in the US, electric car sales grew by a healthy but not revolutionary 10% year on year. More than 1 in 10 cars sold, but not in total, in the United States is an electric vehicle. So, where does India stand in this global picture? Our electric car sales approached 100,000 in 2024, representing about 2% of our domestic car market. While that might seem modest compared to China or Europe, it's important to remember that our EV journey is still in its early stages and that the growth rate is accelerating. In fact, in just the first quarter of 2025, India's electric car sales grew 45% year on year, reaching nearly 35,000 units. Across the world, the electric vehicle market seems bound to continue this boom. In 2025, global electric car sales are expected to exceed 20 million, more than one quarter of all cars sold worldwide. China is projected to reach an electric car sales share of around 60% this year, with Europe second at 25%. That's a major increase from today's levels, though still less than what's projected for other major markets. So, why are we seeing such different adoption rates around the world? A lot of it comes down to affordability. That's why China is so fascinating. In 2024, about two-thirds of all electric cars sold in China were priced lower than their conventional equivalents. And that's without counting purchase incentives. Chinese manufacturers have driven down costs through intense competition, and this has turbocharged adoption, even as government incentives have decreased. Europe's different. In Germany, for example, the average battery electric car price remained 20% higher than that of conventional cars. This price gap, combined with the phase out of subsidies, has dampened sales. The United States faces even steeper challenges. Battery electric cars are still 30% more expensive than conventional vehicles. This persistent price gap is hurting prospects for future growth. India too has a similar gap, though it's coming down. In 2024, the average price premium of battery electric cars in our market fell below 15% for small cars and 25% for SUVs. This is a significant improvement. Just a couple of years ago, they were priced at more than double their conventional counterparts. We are taking our time with this transition. Instead of relying heavily on Chinese imports like Brazil or Thailand, we're trying to take a more self-sufficient approach. We have high tariffs in place for EVs. We're trying to nudge more such domestic capacity through PLIs on cars, auto components, and batteries. So, is that working? Maybe. At the very least, India has managed to come up with a range of battery electric car models priced under 20,000 USD. Now, that's an accessible entry point for middle class Indian consumers. The share of Chinese imports in India's EV sales, as a result, have remained below 15%. You can't talk about affordability without talking about the total cost of ownership, of course. Purchase price isn't the only thing that matters. Maintenance, fuel, and other operating costs matter too. This is particularly important for commercial vehicles like trucks and buses, where people are more likely to look at costs over the entire life cycle. And it's also relevant for India, where fuel costs can be exceptionally high. By 2030, electric buses in India are expected to reach a 25% market share, supported by government initiatives like the PM E-Bus Seva scheme, which aims to deploy 38,000 electric buses across the country. With that, let's look deeper at what's happening in the heavy-duty segment. Globally, electric truck sales grew by nearly 80% in 2024 and now makes up close to 2% of total truck sales. No prizes for guessing who's leading this charge. It's China, of course. Their electric truck sales doubled to 75,000 vehicles last year, representing over 80% of global sales. Not everyone's doing that well. In Europe and the United States, electric truck sales remained relatively flat in 2024. However, in these regions, the number of available models is rising. We've gone from fewer than 70 battery electric truck models in 2020 to more than 400 today, which can meet a far wider range of applications. In India, the PM eDrive scheme, which replaced the earlier FAME 2 initiative, allocated rupees 5 billion or 58 million USD specifically for purchase incentives for electric trucks. This was perhaps necessary. Electric truck sales actually declined in 2024. Hopefully, this new support will revitalize the segment. Whether it actually does, only time will tell. But where India is making progress is in the electric bus sector. Our electric bus stock has increased dramatically from less than 3,000 in 2020 to more than 11,500 by the end of 2024. We've talked about this before, but there's one thing that's hard to deny. These numbers are nowhere nearly as great as those for cars. It turns out the economics of electric heavy-duty vehicles are very different from light-duty ones. They're much more expensive upfront. For one, a battery electric heavy-duty truck costs 2 to 3 times more than an equivalent diesel truck in major markets. If you're operating a business with thin margins, that's a no-go. Over a long time though, greater efficiency and lower energy costs make battery electric vehicles more attractive the more they're used. By 2030, battery electric trucks in Europe and the United States are expected to reach parity on total cost of ownership with diesel trucks for long-haul operations. They're already there in China. So it's a mixed picture. If you have the cash to take an upfront hit, you'll break even over time. One of the most significant developments in the EV market of late is how Chinese manufacturers are responding to mounting trade restrictions by expanding their manufacturing footprint overseas. See, in 2024, multiple regions introduced new tariffs on Chinese electric car imports. The European Union imposed countervailing duties on Chinese battery electric car imports. The United States and Canada implemented tariffs exceeding 100%, with further increases slated for 2025. Markets that were recently receptive to Chinese imports, like Mexico and Brazil, have also approved tariff hikes. So, what did Chinese automakers do? They started building factories abroad to give them a new foothold to export from. By 2026, Chinese overseas manufacturing capacity is expected to almost double to reach over 4.3 million vehicles per year. Europe and Southeast Asia are the primary locations for these new assembly plants. By 2026, almost half of the total Chinese overseas manufacturing capacity will be located in Europe. We've already spoken about how we in India are attempting self-reliance instead. But EV manufacturers that commit to invest in India can import electric cars with much lower duties, reduced from 70% to 15%. That's pulled in some Chinese manufacturers, getting them to team up with the Indian industry. In 2024, for instance, the JSW Group signed a joint venture with China's SAIC Motor to work together on car production under the MG Motor brand. About half of the electric cars sold by MG in India is now produced domestically. The other half is imported from China. By the end of 2024, JSW announced the launch of its own EV brand, and it's discussing technology transfer from partners like BYD and Geely. Will this help us develop an entire supply chain domestically, or will this simply draw us closer to China's orbit? Only time will tell. A very small part of India actually drives cars. Two-wheelers are our primary mode of transportation, accounting for over 80% of vehicle sales. This is where India's EV transition is truly shining. That's also true elsewhere in the world. Two and three-wheelers remain the most electrified road transport segment globally in 2024, with more than 9% of the global fleet now electric. A steady 15% of all new two and three-wheelers are electric, with total sales reaching 10 million units. This move is led by China, India, and Southeast Asia, the world's largest markets for these vehicles, accounting for around 80% of 2024's global sales. These markets treasure the affordability and accessibility of two and three-wheelers. After all, they're often the easiest entry point into electric mobility for those in developing economies. In India, electric two-wheeler sales reached 1.3 million in 2024, 6% of our overall two-wheeler market. We have a dynamic ecosystem with 220 different manufacturers in 2024, up from 180 in 2023, though the top 4 companies account for about 80% of sales. Many of our electric two-wheelers are surprisingly affordable. The Ola S1X entry model, for example, comes with a 2 kWh battery and 6 kW peak power. Its price tag of around Rs 70,000 or around 850 USD is actually lower than the average price of the 5 best-selling conventional two-wheelers in India. So how did we manage this? Government support bridged much of the affordability gap. The PM eDrive policy provides purchase incentives of up to Rs 5,000 per kilowatt hour for two-wheelers fitted with lithium-ion batteries, and it will continue to do so at least until March 2026. Hopefully, this nascent ecosystem will be self-sustaining by then. But we're quickly getting there. The 80 largest electric two-wheeler makers in India had a combined production capacity of 10 million units in 2024, almost 8 times the domestic sales that year. This capacity is expected to increase even further to 17 million in the near term if all announced expansions come through. This may well position India as an export hub. India has also seen lots of success with electric three-wheelers. In 2023, India overtook China to become the world's largest market for electric three-wheelers. By 2024, a record 57% of India's three-wheelers were electric. There's a lot of nuance to this story, though, that we've talked about in detail before. Before you can have an electric vehicle revolution, you need a battery revolution. In 2024, global battery demand went past 1 terawatt hours for the first time. That's a staggering amount of energy storage. The battery demand in any average week in 2024 exceeded the total battery demand for an entire year just 1 decade earlier. EVs were the primary driver of this surge, accounting for over 950 gigawatt hours of battery demand, 25% more than in 2023. And this will only grow. EV battery demand is projected to reach more than 3 terawatt hours by 2030, a threefold increase from today. The supply is working overtime to match this demand. Battery prices fell by about 20% in 2024, the largest drop since 2017, driven by low critical mineral prices and intensifying competition. But this decline wasn't uniform across regions. While prices in China fell by nearly 30%, Europe and the United States saw a more modest 10 to 15% drop. This widening gap is partly why Chinese EV and battery producers have such an advantage. India isn't really a player in this game yet, as we've explored recently. To us, right now, batteries are both a challenge and an opportunity. On the one hand, it's a new business we can get into. We've opened our first domestic battery plants in 2024 with more than 5 gigawatt hours of manufacturing capacity. Reliance, a domestic leader, plans to launch a lithium ion battery cell factory this year, and Tata is building a battery plant in Tamil Nadu. But the question is, what happens if we don't crack this industry? After all, we still have a long way to go. China's battery manufacturing capacity is currently more than 500 times larger than India's. If batteries are the new oil, as we believe, should we anticipate an OPEC like battery squeeze in the future? We're not the only ones asking this question. There's a concern in Europe and North America as well. China was responsible for 80% of global battery cell production in 2024 and has established a near monopoly on battery components production, supplying almost 85% of cathode active materials and over 90% of anode active material production. This, as we recently explored, is true no matter which of the many battery technology one looks at. All these new electric vehicles need some place to charge, and the global charging infrastructure is expanding rapidly to meet demand. Public charging stations have doubled in the past 2 years. More than 1.3 million public charging points came up in 2024 alone. That's approximately equal to the total number of points available in 2020. About two-thirds of the growth in public chargers since 2020 has occurred in China, which now has about 65% of the charging infrastructure and 60% of electric light-duty vehicle stock globally. In Europe, the number of public charging points grew by more than 35% in 2024 to reach just over 1 million. The United States increased its charging stock by 20% in 2024 to just under 200,000 public charging points. Beyond just the number of chargers, the world is also moving to better chargers. In 2024, the global stock of fast chargers reached 2 million, and ultra fast chargers, which are capable of delivering 150 kilowatt or above, grew by 50%, now accounting for nearly 10% of all fast chargers. These ultra fast chargers are critical for reducing charging times and making EVs more practical for a wider range of uses. In India too, our charging infrastructure is expanding rapidly. We've put up about 40,000 new public chargers in 2024 alone. This might accelerate further. In October 2024, rupees 2000 crore or 240 million USD was allocated to charging infrastructure through the PM eDrive scheme, mostly for our cities and heavily used transport corridors. This push is particularly important for India. Most urban Indians live in multi-family buildings without dedicated parking. Public charging is essential for boosting EV adoption here. But we aren't pushing as strongly for fast charging. After all, 2 and 3 wheelers dominate our EV market and the requirements are different. Most of these vehicles have small batteries that can be charged effectively with lower power equipment, and that's why our charging infrastructure could end up looking very different from what you see abroad. We're also trying out battery swapping because of our unique challenges. Instead of waiting for a vehicle to charge, riders can simply exchange their depleted battery for a fully charged one in a matter of minutes. Our battery swapping market has taken off in the past 5 years, with companies like Battery Smart and Sun Mobility leading the way. Battery Smart alone reached 1,000 stations in April 2024, while Sun Mobility has more than 630 swapping stations in 19 Indian cities. But is this enough? India's charging infrastructure would need to grow nearly five-fold by 2030 to support our projected EV growth. That means adding around 50,000 charging points each year through 2030, 30% more than the number of additions in 2024. This requires significant investment. Can our grid even handle such a surge? Interestingly, yes. The impact of this on our electricity grid would actually be manageable. Even with our projected growth in EVs, they would account for only about 1.1% of India's total electricity demand by 2030. In fact, EVs could become a valuable source of flexible demand for a growing but intermittent renewable energy capacity, helping to integrate more solar and wind power into our grid. Technologies like smart charging can ensure that EVs charge during times of high renewable energy availability, further reducing their environmental impact. Now coming to the tidbits. Indigo is set to restore 80 of its grounded aircraft back into its service over the coming months, according to a report from Business Standard. This increase is about twice the airline's typical annual addition of 40 planes. The planned restoration is expected to boost the airline's fleet strength significantly and could help moderate airfares. Indigo, which is India's largest airline by market share, has faced capacity challenges due to the grounding issue but is now focused on stabilizing its operations. The move aligns with the airline's broader strategy to scale operations and to expand its route network. The return of these aircraft marks a key step in improving asset utilization and enhancing service reliability. ITC Limited has reported a rise in quarterly profit, supported primarily by growth in its cigarettes segment and continued strength in rural markets. The company's cigarette sales grew nearly 6%, benefiting from price hikes, improved volumes in competitive regions, and premium offerings that are generally margin boosting. This contributed significantly to the overall earnings performance. Other segments such as FMCG, agribusiness, and hotels remain stable. The Government of India has notified the Payments Regulatory Board Regulations 2025 establishing a new Payments Regulatory Board or PRB to replace the RBI's existing Board for Regulation and Supervision of Payment and Settlement Systems or BPSS. The PRB will have 6 members, 3 nominated by the RBI and 3 by the central government, with the RBI governor serving as chairperson and holding the casting vote. Other members include the RBI Deputy Governor in charge of payment systems and an officer nominated by the RBI Central Board. The PRB will be supported by the Department of Payment and Settlement Systems or DPSS within the RBI. Additionally, experts in payments, IT and law may be invited to board meetings, with the RBI's principal legal advisor as a permanent invitee. That's all the news I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.
Disclaimer: this content is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks, brands, or products mentioned are recommendations or endorsements.